Good morning, all of you. Welcome back to Ansarkari. So, today, first, we'll be going through the Hindu newspaper for 25th of November, and after that, we'll also going to have a look at the Financial Express and the Mint. So, the first news piece is about the challenges being faced by the export sector of India given the global slowdown. So, the domestic demand can play a significant role in this situation. And if we look at the reason behind inflation, so initially during the year 2022, the retail inflation was majorly driven by the edible oil and fats. And as we saw it yesterday itself, that the prices of edible oil has cooled down. So that is not a cause of concern now. But now the inflation is driven by the domestic component of the food. And also, if you'll have a look at this data given in the table, you will see that in March 2022, cereals basically it is showing the change in the prices. So it was at 5, and in October it was at 12. So there is significant increase in the prices of cereals. And when we see at the prices of the fuel, it was at 7.5 in March and it has increased to 9.9. So these are the two major factors which are now driving inflation in India. So high inflation, rising borrowing cost, and geopolitical tensions are the current challenges that we have to deal with. But the important thing that we have to understand, and always we need to focus more upon solutions. So the solution in raising the India's economic growth in future, given that we are having expectations that are we heading towards recession or not. So the domestic demand sector can prove to be one of the strengths which can help India in driving its economic growth. And secondly, we need to also focus upon reinvigorating the investment cycle also. So, but obviously that is going to happen when the repo rate is reduced. Then recent inflation, they are driven by the local factors. And if we look at the data, so India's retail inflation, it has cooled down to 6.8% in the month of October. So remember the facts that are given. You need to remember the factors which are driving inflation currently. And as far as the CEC is concerned, we are covering this topic in the past 2 days. So you can go and have a look at those videos. And let's move ahead. Okay, talking about child marriage, the article is specifically talking about the state of Rajasthan because this social evil is it is being practiced at a huge scale in the state of Rajasthan. So we are talking here about in the context of India. So India has made substantial progress in reducing the incidence of the social evil that is child marriage over the years, but the economic hardship induced by the COVID-19 pandemic has, we can say, it led to rollback of the gains that we made and the progress that we saw in curbing this social menace. So we can say that we are again back to the previous situation and we need to put in more efforts to come out of it. So there was a steady decline in the prevalence of the practice from 47.4% in 2005 to 23.3% in 2021. So we can say that it has almost halved. And also, you can find out more about the United Nations Population Fund. Then you need to know about the National Commission for Women and the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. After that, what are the child welfare committees? So there is so much of social acceptance of child marriages that most of the people, including even the administration, they look the other way. So they do not, take up this matter seriously, or at they do not try to put in that much efforts required to prevent all this from happening. So, moving ahead, we see that according to the UNFPA, child marriage it is deeply linked to the economic status of the community. So the main factor, or we can say the main reason behind child marriages is the economic status. So we need to focus more upon improving the economic status, elevating the poverty levels, and we are moving ahead. We are seeing that Over the past 15 years, India has been able to move 415 million people out of the poverty, specifically talking about the multidimensional poverty. And also NFHS 5, which was conducted for the period 2019 to 2021, it shows that variations in child marriage is in accordance with the household's wealth index. So again, it is also pointing towards the same factor, that is the economic status matters, and also given the social conditions. So all those things are contributing to child marriages, and the cases and the instances are rising again. Then from PT perspective, you must be aware that Banjara and the Kanjar communities, they are found in the state of Rajasthan, and we need to focus upon improving the economic status and also the educational status. So these things can fructify only when we are taking steps and ensuring that they are being effectively implemented at the local level, at the ground level, with periodic monitoring of the innovations and the steps that we are taking to deal with child marriages. So this is the thing that the article is talking about. Then talking about reservation, the state of Chhattisgarh, it is bringing up amendments, and the level of reservation in the state is going to go up to 76%. So where does the fundamental right to equality goes? We don't know. So 76% of reservation in the state, which is obviously breaching the 50% limit, which was set by the Indira Sahani case 1992. Okay, so yesterday also we mentioned this thing that the Jallikattu case, the state of Tamil Nadu is asking for lifting the ban on the practice of Jallikattu. So Supreme Court has provided with its observations. So it says that prevention of cruelty is not an absolute right. So which means that cruel the like cruelty in some sense or in some amount is acceptable, and the constitution, it commands us to be compassionate to all living creatures, but it should have a balance. Then killing of stray dogs, it talks about the killing of stray dogs, which is as we know that it is the instances have increased in the current times. People are taking out their frustration on animals, and it said that even the animals, they have the same rights as human beings, so much so that cruelty in sports and entertainment was prohibited. And the case of in case of boxing, which is obviously taken as profession by a lot of people, few people practice as their hobbies. So that is out of your choice. You have the right to take your own conscious decision, and this thing has to be set apart from the animals. And as we know that liberty is an inherent right of every living being, so which is also recognized by the constitution. So it is basically saying against lifting of the ban of Jallikattu, because obviously animals do have the rights as much as the humans do, and cruelty is not acceptable in sports and entertainment. Then, in case of the editorials, first we'll be talking about the India Australia FTA. So, the Australian Parliament has upheld the amendment and the agreement, which was signed by both the sides. So, it is the economic cooperation and the trade agreement. And as we know that China, even in the case of trade and commerce, it is basically using it as the weaponization. It is weaponizing the trade against, again, we know against US also. So that thing has surely galvanized the sentiment that India can be a more trustworthy partner. So this thing is, we can say that the actions of China when we talk about the trade is helping India to come more, to attract more partners, and this would help in India signing more FTAs. Now, that is to be seen how those FTAs are going to perform. And also, The two countries, they are already part of the recently formed. So India and Australia, they are already partners in Quad. So other members of Quad includes US and Japan. Then they are also partners of the Trilateral Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. So you can Google and find out more about this initiative. And also they are a part of the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. Then the world is shuffling its feet away from the dodgy supply chains towards the China plus one strategy. So you must be aware what is China plus one strategy. So it is basically now the companies, they are not only focusing upon investing only in China, they are trying to diversify their investments in different countries. So that is the meaning of China plus one strategy, and this can definitely come in prelims. Then the also yesterday we saw what are going to be the benefits of this FTA with Australia. So this is going to generate new jobs in the labor intensive sectors. We also had an agreement about the double taxation avoidance agreement. So this is going to be hugely beneficial to the IT companies, the IT firms. They'll be able to earn a more amount of profits, a higher profit, which is going to definitely give them a push to, work more harder and achieving new heights. So this does not automatically mean that if we have like signed an FTA agreement, this is going to be a win-win situation, because when we look into the past, India had an FTA with ASEAN and Japan, but that did not see that India was, really able to reduce their trade deficit and turn it into a surplus. So let's see how this FTA is going to perform in future. But for the time being, let's hope for the best. Now coming to the draft telecom bill, and since it has OTT also as a part of it, so we are going to have the discussion in that context. So whether the inclusion of OTT in the draft telecommunication bill is called for or not, we are going to examine this question. And the main argument that is provided behind the inclusion of OTT, that is over the top platforms, is that the principle of same service and same rules. So since it is believed that OTT and the telecom service providers, they are providing same kind of services, so same rules should apply on both. However, the same service means that as a user, I should be able to substitute one for the other service, but that is not the case. And we can say that OTT is dependent upon the telecommunication service providers to, provide their services, but it is not the other way around. And also, the OTT communication services, they are applications and they are value-added communication services that ride on the basic communication services that the telecos provide. So this is the same thing that I just said, that OTTs are dependent upon the telecom services providers for providing their services to the consumers. And so why are the telecos, they are rooting for the inclusion of the OTT communication services within this bill? So the reason is the desire to preserve the arbitrage that exists right now, and they want to leverage that benefit. So the leverage basically the arbitrage that exists between the voice and the data tariffs. So the telecom, the companies, they want to take an advantage of this arbitrage which is present. Now, talking about why the OTT communication services, the services, they should be kept out of the ambit of the telecom bill. So the reason is that they are already covered under the existing IT Act 2000, and rather OTT should be a component of the proposed Digital India Act. And also there is one thing which is lacking is that the OTTs, they are not licensed or they are not pre-authorized. So we need to focus on this thing also and bring that also into the law. So we must come up with the policy of, licensing the OTT platforms and ensuring that they are regulated in the right manner. Also, it is going to affect the inflow of the venture capital funding to the OTTs. And also, there is one more thing, one more challenge when we talk about distinguishing between the OTT communication services from any other OTT platform, because there are various OTT platforms which are also having the element of messaging. For example, the Flipkart, Ola, Make My Trip. So they do have this component of messaging. So whenever you book an Ola or an Uber, you have the option to message the driver. So how does one make a distinction between the OTT communication service providers and other OTT platforms that also includes the communication services? So that is something which is impossible or very difficult to achieve. And the telecom bill will impact only the India-based OTT players. So it is not going to bring under its ambit the OTT players, the global players basically who are providing their services in India also. So it is just going to cover the domestic players, and this would obviously seriously handicap the Indian service providers vis-a-vis the foreign competitors. And obviously, this is not a good thing for the domestic service providers. So we need to rather shift the OTT thing to the Digital India Act instead of including it into the telecommunication bill. Okay, when we talk about climate finance to the developing countries, so this article is focusing upon that thing. And why this is the news? Because obviously recently we just had the COP27 in Egypt. So basically, the developing countries, they have two challenges, twin challenges. The first one is they need to provide the economic cost of the climate change, basically whatever changes and the losses and damage that have occurred, they need to work upon that thing. And the second is they need to cut down on their fossil fuel use to reduce future carbon emissions. So these are two things which developing countries need finance for. And obviously, since they are developing, so they are not so much equipped financially, they are not so strong that they can deal with all the situation completely on their own. And also in this direction, in the COP27, the loss and damage fund has also been it has also been set up, but it is still on the papers. And which countries are going to provide the finance and how much amount is still, and it is yet to be decided, which has been left for the next COP, which is going to happen in UAE. And that's it shows the pace at which things are being done. And also the, you can say, in current times of urgency, the things are moving, or we can say they are not being taken up that seriously as required. So it is definitely harder for the developing countries, and much of the infrastructure is also yet to be developed in the developing world, which is the basic infrastructure of roads, housing, hospitals, schools, and industries. So, we should focus on finding a common ground between the economic development and climate mitigation efforts. So these two things needs to go in synergy. They need to work in synergy so as to achieve the objective of being a developed country, which would definitely require focusing on renewable energy space and the sustainable urbanization. And also the idea of mitigation, it should not overshadow that of the development process and the policies and the schemes. So we also need to maintain a balance here. And when we talk specifically about India, so in the past, the India made a mistake of, just focusing on deploying the green energy and not ensuring or not focusing on manufacturing it domestically. But now things are moving in, focusing on the domestic production and domestic manufacturing and relying less on the outside world on importing the goods and the services that we require. So we now think more in terms of becoming a competitive player, and obviously with our future target of becoming carbon zero emissions by 2070. Then a recent development when we talk about the Arctic region. So Russia came up with a new icebreakers, and which is obviously empowering it, and it is basically strengthening itself militarily when we are talking about the Arctic region compared to the other players, which are the members of the Arctic Council. So you need to find out more about Arctic Council from the PT perspective. So we are going to discuss that what is the significance of the newly launched icebreakers. Secondly, which countries, basically why countries they are racing to deploy to display their power more in the Arctic region. And thirdly, what is India's position on this? So climate change, it opens up the Arctic region, it is giving access to new routes and also the opportunities to find out about the resources which are present in that region. And this because of this, more and more countries are running towards that region, increasing their military deployment, focusing more on, improving and researching more about their defense products. So that's how things are changing in Arctic region. So this is definitely going to help strengthen Russia's status as a great Arctic power if other countries lag behind. And the name of the icebreakers is Yakutia, Ural, Arctic, Arctica, and Sibir. So these terms can also come in prelims, and you can be asked that these terms are related to what. So these are the icebreaker technologies present with Russia deployed in the Arctic region, and also the uh, the importance of the northern sea route it increases and it cuts down the time to reach Asia by up to 2 weeks. So this is going to save the cost and further increase the foreign competitiveness of the goods being exported to Asia and to Europe. So we are comparing it with the current route which goes via the Suez Canal. And in the backdrop of the war on Ukraine also, the members of the Arctic Council, that is Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the US, they announced that they would temporarily not they're not going to participate in the meetings of the Arctic Council because of the Russia-Ukraine war. So, unlike Antarctica, talking about the global commons, Arctic is not a global common. So, accentuating this accentuates the problem further, and that's why the countries are running behind, developing their technologies at a faster pace so that they do not lag behind Russia. So Antarctica is a global common, and the country which is going to be more stronger is going to enjoy more power in that region. So Arctic, remember, Arctic is not a global common. And also, when we talk about NATO, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization that has been conducting regular exercises in the region. And also, when we talk about China, how can China be behind? So, China, it calls itself as a near Arctic state, and China is like it just wants to be present everywhere in the world, be it the South China Sea, be it the Arctic, be it the Indian Ocean. So, China is now planning for a polar silk route. So that is the development as far as China is concerned. And when we talk about India's stand, India has an Arctic research program which has as many as 13 expeditions since 2007 in the Arctic. And in March this year, India also unveiled its first Arctic policy, which was titled India and the Arctic, Building a Partnership for Sustainable Development. So this can also come in PT, and you need to find out more about what are its features. And India is also one of the observers in the Arctic Council. Then Arctic. So from all this discussion, we come to the bottom line that Arctic is the next geopolitical hotspot. So you need to have all the dimensions, all your points ready at one place and also on your tips. So there are different dimensions which you need to be aware about when we are talking about the Arctic region. So that is environmental, economic, political, and military. Next up, we'll be talking about the currency in circulation since the demonetization that happened in November 2016. So currency has almost doubled when we are comparing with that period. So now it stands at rupees 32 point almost 2 lakh crore rupees, which was earlier at almost 18 lakh crore rupees before demonetization. And as we know that with increase in money supply, the inflation also increases. So this can be also one of the factors. We can say this is the long-term factor behind the inflation. And demonetization was a transformational economic policy step. How far do you agree with this? So you can write back your answers to Ansarkari, and the email is mentioned in the description box. Then it is completely wrong to say that advanced countries they have become less like they have become cashless or they are using less of cash. So that is not the case. The currency in circulation has increased even in the advanced countries also. And the GDP has grown like it has grown over the period of time. So it would definitely mean that people they are earning more income. So their requirement for currency would also increase. Then you must be aware about the location of the Chabad port, and we are in discussions with Iran regarding the development process that India is contributing towards the development of Chabad port, which is going to be an alternative to our exports to the European region. So this would it would counter Pakistan. And also in PT, you can be asked about the Shahid Beheshti terminal. So this terminal is located at the Chaba port, and you need to find out its location in Atlas. Now talking about pro-farmer changes to the crop scheme. So in the scheme of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, find out about its features. To meet the challenges of the climate crisis and the rapid technological changes, so things must move in favor of farmers so that they are not suffering in future. So a positive development, that is unemployment rate dips marginally to 7.2%, although marginally not by a significant amount. And this is also because of the low base effect. So we'll talk about what is it actually. But as of now, the unemployment rate has dipped to 7.2% in the period July to September 2022, according to the labor force, the periodic labor force survey. And this is for urban areas only. And when we talk about women, the decline in the unemployment rate in women was less pronounced. So also, we can bring the point of gender disparity. So when you look at the graph, the red line is for women. So you can see that the graph is not as steeper. It is not falling at much steeper rate in case of women, this red line. And when you see the dark blue, it has fallen by a very steeper rate. So that is for men, and the light blue is showing for the overall level of unemployment rate. So it was at almost 10% in July to September 2021, and it has now fallen to 7.2%. So this has been conducted for people above the age of 15 and obviously by the National Statistical Office. So certain important definitions are mentioned in this article. So it says that the survey is saying that labor force participation rate has risen almost by 1% from 48% to 47%. Sorry, from it rises to 48% from 47%. And looking at the definition, so unemployment ratio is defined as the percentage of persons who are unemployed among the persons in the labor force. So you need to remember these economic terms very carefully, otherwise you can go wrong. Then when talking about the worker population ratio, it also witnessed a marginal increase. So it means basically the percentage of employed persons in the population. So here we are talking about the entire population. In unemployment rate, we were talking about the unemployed people in the labor force. All right, so that is the difference between them. And when we talk about the labor force participation rate, it is defined as the percentage of persons in the labor force who are working or who are seeking or available for work in the population. And over the past 2 decades, that is the past 20 years, according to the Ashoka University's data, the labor force participation rate for women has been steadily declining despite an increase in their educational attainment. So we are like moving positively when we talk about the education of women, but despite that, their labor force participation rate has not increased, rather it has declined steadily. So this can also come in the form of a question in mains. So keep your arguments ready. And a small development, that is the criminal cases against the candidates that are contesting in the Gujarat elections, is it stands at 167, and few of them are facing even serious charges. So this is an example of criminalization of politics. So is this basically practicing a healthy democracy or not? Now, Supreme Court on Thursday it launched its RTI portal, which will help the people to access information about the Supreme Court. And talking about the Uniform Civil Code, it you can find the Uniform Civil Code in Part 4 of the Constitution in DPSP Article 44. So that is related to it. And talking about the importance of millets, the International Year of Millets is going to be celebrated by United Nations in the year 2023 with significant role and contribution from India. And taking this case study, which is from Odisha, so the tribal people, they have shown a tremendous performance in reviving the cultivation of millets, and the tribe is the Kushia Khond tribe. So it is from the state of Odisha, and Belgar Valley, you can spot it this thing in Atlas. So how the cultivation has been revived is that they celebrate a festival which is called the Burlang Yatra, and they exchange seeds. So basically they are located in the district of the Kandhamal in Odisha, and they you know they are cultivating 12 types of millets. So many varieties are being cultivated, and often we since the upper class or the rich people, according to them, millets is a poor man's food. So these are also certain constraints and challenges which basically not letting the millets to reach the last mile connectivity. And Nirman, which is in collaboration with the Millet Network of India. So you can find out what is MINI, that is the Millet Network of India. And the villagers, they participated in this festival with the different varieties, which is finger millet, red little millets, black millet, sorghum, pearl millet, and foxtail millet. So these are the different species and varieties of millet. So people, they also managed to revive the consumption of the companion their not consumption, basically cultivation of their companion crops, which is pulses, oil seeds, and tubers. So that's how the cultivation has been revived. When the entire community comes together, everything is possible. Then talking about the aviation sector, so Aircraft Security Rules 2022 has been notified, and this will empower the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security to impose penalties up to rupees 1 crore on airports and airlines for violation of the security measures. Even individuals can face the penalties, and the BCAS, it will also be able to suspend or cancel an entity's airport security clearance and the security program. Then the other regulators of the civil sector includes the Director General of Civil Aviation. Then there is Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. So United Nations Aviation Watchdog, that is the International Civil Aviation Organization, it raised questions about the three regulators as far as India's aviation sector is concerned regarding their functioning without statutory powers. So development because of this, but yes, a positive development, which is very crucial. So you must be aware that United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is celebrated on 25th of November. Now talking about The center has given powers to the Competition Commission of India to take up the anti-profiteering matters. So you should know what is anti-profiteering matters. Basically, it is about whether the the shopkeepers, they passing the benefit to the consumers when the GST rates are reduced. So that is anti-profiteering cases. So that needs to be achieved. And talking about the Asia Pacific region, recession is unlikely in the region in the year 2023. And talking about, as we started with the article of the export growth challenges in India. So the chief economic advisor, the Sir V. Anand Nageswaram, says that we need to draw impetus from the stronger investment cycle, secondly, the financial system, and thirdly, structural reforms to ensure a healthy growth in the years ahead. And however, the risks to India's growth would persist if the price of crude oil spikes. So that is to be noted and to be monitored. So the risk aversion returns to the financial markets over the next few months also. So these are the two factors that needs monitoring. And talking about the Indian gamers. So a small development that is people are now exploring that gaming can become a career opportunity for them. They can become a gaming influence. But the question arises whether it lead to a real addition to our economic growth or not. So this is it from The Hindu. Now let's take up another newspaper, that is Financial Express. So in Financial Express, basically, okay. So in Financial Express, the first article is about the 75 years of completion of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. One cannot help but we need to reflect on the similarity between the economic situation that persisted during the 1940s and the one that we are witnessing today. So the similarity is just that again we are seeing the rise of protectionism and there is emergence of strong nationalist leaders. So the global institutions which were created after the world wars, they never really served their global purpose and they were controlled by obviously the Western and the developed world. And in the last 15 years, three major events have happened, which is the global financial crisis in 2008-9, second was the pandemic, and third was the Russia-Ukraine war, and also one challenge that is the climate crisis. So talking about the facts which are relevant for PT is that Bretton Woods Conference was held in 1944, which led to the formation of the WTO, and WTO basically it came into picture in 1995. Bretton Woods Conference was for World Bank and IMF. So the objective of the Bretton Woods Conference it was to work towards the better world post the Second World War, which ended in 1945. So there were three key objectives behind them. First was the re-establishing the exchange rate between the countries. Second was restoring the internal economy of the nations. Third was thirdly was re-establishing the trade relations. So I think there's nothing more. Yeah, just the monetary policy. That is, the challenge is that there are data lags. So that needs to be taken into consideration when we are, forming when we are focusing on formulation of the monetary policy. So the RBI is going to come up with the next policy in first week of December. And from PT perspective, you should know what is Monetary Policy Committee and its composition. So when we talk about the data lag, the inflation data that we have today is from the month of October, and we are just about to start our preparation for the December monetary policy. So there is the data lag, in which obviously the challenge in predicting the future economic situation over a couple of months. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and share the video as much as possible. Thank you so much.